Coming up, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter goes into safe mode.
Atlas V issues a money-back guarantee.
R2 shows a little leg, and have we forgotten about the moon?
The what?
Stay tuned. Tomorrow begins now.
Private space station.
And welcome to Spacevidcast, episode 7.08 for Saturday, March 15th, 2014. My name is Benjamin Higginbotham. With me, as always, is my beautiful, lovely, wonderful, and talented wife, Carrie Ann Higginbotham, and we'll be your hosts for this episode today. Before we get started, we'd like to say a huge thank you to the Spacevidcast Premier patrons who have helped make this show go. Now, the Premier patrons, they're the ones who have spent $10 or more at patreon.com/SpaceVidcast on this episode. So $10 or more, and you could become a Spacevidcast Premier member. You not only get your name in the show, but there are a few other perks as well. You can get more information at patreon.com/SpaceVidcast, and it's members like that help ensure that Spacevidcast continues to do this week after week.
Yeah.
And it's a great program. I think it's a lot better than the previous program we had, which is epic. If you get value from Spacevidcast, please consider putting value back in. Now, you don't need to spend $10. You can spend less than that. There are different reward levels that you can go. So more information at patreon.com/SpacevidCast. Let's go ahead and get started with some space news. First up, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter went into safe mode and has since come back out.
Yes.
MRO went into safe mode on March 9th after an unscheduled computer swap, and then back on Thursday morning, March 13th, we actually resumed normal science back on the main computer, but the antennas, so what has happened is the primary antennas have failed to the backup area,
right,
and they've stayed on the backup antennas, but the primary computer's back in play again.
Right.
Now, we use MRO for a couple of different things on Mars. First off, its name kind of self-descriptive, right? Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, so it orbits Mars. It does recon work for us, so it's going to take pictures of Mars. But more importantly, the two remaining rovers that we've got on Mars, we've got Curiosity and Opportunity.
Yes.
I'm like, Spirit. No. Not Spirit.
So
We've got
close.
Curiosity and Opportunity remaining on Mars. Well, they don't have antennas that are going to make it all the way back to Earth, so we use these satellites. We use Odyssey and MRO we beam the signal from the rovers up to those satellites, and then the satellites repeat it back over to Earth. So when MRO was offline, we've actually took some of that science down. Now, we still had Odyssey, so we could still use Odyssey for all of that,
right,
but it wasn't really available for full science payloads because you can only do it when Odyssey's overhead.
Right.
If that makes sense. So we're back to full science. Full speed for full science on Mars with both MRO and Odyssey for Opportunity and Curiosity, and yay. And hopefully they'll figure out what's going on with the transmitter.
Exactly.
Yep. Atlas V money back guarantee.
Woohoo!
All right, so you want to fly your commercial payload on an Atlas V rocket.
Because who doesn't?
Because who doesn't, right? It's an awesome rocket. It has a great track record.
This is true.
Ever since United Launch Alliance took it. Here's a shot. This is what an Atlas V rocket looks like. It's a workhorse in the United Launch Alliance Army, right? They've used it many times, but generally not for commercial payloads. Usually it's for government payloads. And the reason it's used for government payloads, not for commercial payloads, is its price.
It's really expensive. Really, really expensive. We're talking $225 million to launch on an Atlas V, which is can be a lot, particularly when, the commercial, I was going to say launch providers, the commercial customers in general don't have that kind of money just sort of lying around, and you're going to put all of your money into just the launch itself. And comparatively, SpaceX Falcon 9 launch is about $45 million.
54.
I'm sorry, 54. So sorry. I inverted my numbers. So $225 million versus $54 million is kind of a huge thing. But with this money back guarantee sort of idea, or money back guarantee, right? That's basically it. Should something happen to the payload on launch, then you get the money that you paid into for the launch. You don't get money back for the payload itself, but you get money back from buying the ride, essentially.
So using even numbers, if the launch was an even 200 million and your payload was an even 200 million, then you would get, and you were ascending, and the Atlas V had a rapid unscheduled disassembly, you get one of two options. One, they're going to give you 200 million back.
Right.
And then your insurance company will hopefully pay for your payload.
Hopefully.
Or two, if you have a second payload, which sometimes you do, usually that's for the government, but maybe you do. Maybe you've got another one laying around. Maybe it was a fleet and you've got the next one ready to go.
Sure.
Then you could opt to fly that payload again on an Atlas V for free. So your only cost was that new payload, which is, I guess that's good. I think they're trying to be more competitive because if you fly on a Falcon 9, you do have to pay insurance for the Falcon 9, right? For the whole reloft of the flight, I believe. I don't know that for certain. So if I'm a consumer... If I'm a consumer and I can afford a rocket launch, good for me. If I'm a customer and I'm putting a payload into orbit, I'm definitely paying for my payload, and I'm definitely paying for insurance on the payload. But I think I'm also paying for insurance to refly the payload to make up the money that would have been lost by. Right. So I think that's what United Launch Alliance is kind of trying to circumvent or get around, saying, look, that's built into the cost of this rocket.
Right.
But by the numbers, you could have 4 Falcon 9 rockets for the price of 1. Yeah. Actually, you could have 5. You could have 5. Almost, not quite. You could have 4, like 4 and a quarter.
4 and a
quarter.
Yay.
So,
I only want a quarter of a rocket launch, please. Thank you.
Maybe someone does. Secondary payload, something like that.
I suppose. That would work.
So this is a slightly more geeky thing. You guys all remember the Ares 1? This was part of the Constellation program, and it was a solid motor stack. So instead of using liquid like we do for most everything else, it used a solid, kind of almost like a rubber fuel, and it did so in a 5-segment stack. And the problem with this, with solid fuels, any solid fuel, is that there's something called thrust oscillation. And what that is basically it vibrates. And it vibrates a lot. It shakes you a lot. And you hear stories of the space shuttle where when they're ascending, and the solids kick in the astronaut, it's like, oh boy, wow, it's a much more violent ride going up, and you can actually see it. If you ever see internal footage of the space shuttle, you can see them just shaking as they go up, and then the solids detach, and while they're still getting speed from these main engines of the space shuttle, those are liquid, and it becomes a much smoother ride.
Okay.
So that vibration is coming from the solids. Now, on the space shuttle, the whole vehicle absorbed that vibration, so you weren't being shook to death.
Right.
But on an Ares 1, you're sitting right on top of it.
Right. There's nothing else there.
It's the solid motor, and then you sit on top of the solid motor, and there was concern that it will vibrate you to death. Now, those concerns were apparently from an overly, what am I trying to say, optimistic, they were being overly paranoid with the numbers, and it turns out that was not actually the case with the Ares 1. You would have been able to survive just fine, based on additional data that we had since gathered. But
that's good.
Point is, ESA and, I don't remember who else, but ESA in France, CNES, I think it's, are trying to figure out what this is, how to dampen this. We kind of know what it's coming from. So they actually have a test article. Here it is. This is a solid motor test article. This is a reduced scale of 2 to 9 solid motor, and this is based on the Ariane 5 solid motors themselves. And the whole point of this is that they want to see if they can actually figure out how to dampen some of this and get more data on what's happening inside of a solid motor. So here's actually a test firing. This lasted 28 seconds at a pressure of 65 bars, and there were 263 sensors on it.
Wow.
And what they're trying to do is get modeling data for mastering the phenomenon of this thrust oscillation on the solid motors. And the advantage of this is, so a lot of people are anti-solid fuel, and that's the wrong approach. It's different technology that can be used in different ways. Solids do have their place. So if you can figure out what's causing this and you can minimize it, you don't necessarily have to get rid of it, but if you can help mitigate it in a way that doesn't add a lot of weight, now you've got an extremely powerful engine, a motor, that can help bring you to space without a huge amount of oscillation going up. And that's exactly what they're working on. So basically what happens is there are vortices that shed within the solid motors during combustion, which creates the shearing effect. That's what happens. And so now they're trying to find a way around that.
Very nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And that happened Tuesday, March 11th, 2014.
Yay.
We're showing a little leg now.
Oh, well, I mean, who isn't these days, really?
Right. I mean, SpaceX is showing some leg of the Falcon 9R, or Falcon 9 1.1 at Cape for launch.
Yep.
And then Robonaut. They're actually bringing it. Check it out.
This is creepy in so many different ways.
Would you say 7 points?
Yeah, there are 7 joints. So what's going on is they're going to be putting legs onto Robonaut 2, who's on the International Space Station. I do also love that we sort of speak about him as if he is a real thing.
Well, he is a real thing.
No, but you know what I'm
Just so
saying.
you know.
You know what I'm saying. We humanize this sort
Yeah.
of, which is the whole idea.
We made him look human, so that's why we humanized him.
We did. The full leg span is 9 feet long with 7 different joints. And you saw the sort of clamps in the video there at the end instead of feet. So this will enable him to go around the station a little bit better, as well as eventually go outside of the station and do some of the spacewalks that we know are extremely dangerous for humans to be doing, even if their spacesuits leak
Creepy.
water for no good reason.
Man, imagine him walking on the outside of the space station, just kind of walking around and
That
kind
is
of
the stuff that
peering
nightmares are made
into
of.
the cupola and freaking out the astronauts.
Oh gosh, yeah.
It's super creepy.
The effectors that are on the bottom, the feet little clampy things, also have a very similar vision system that Canadarm has. So it can see what it's clamping onto.
That's cool.
Yeah, they're very, very cool. And the reason for the 7 joints, of course, is to be able to maneuver around better than a human would be able to. And 9 feet, obviously, much longer. And there's just so many different options when that comes around. But yeah, we made the joke earlier about like Falcon's just full of legs these days anyway.
Well, and we didn't mention, so the legs are going up on the Falcon 9 rocket. So,
yeah, the SpaceX is
the next
launch.
CRS-3 mission from SpaceX, which is slid to no earlier than March 30th,
Right.
has these legs on board.
Yes.
So SpaceX is bringing Robonaut's legs up on the rocket that now has landing
legs.
legs attached to it.
Awesome.
Awesome.
And I also sort of love that everyone keeps calling Robonaut 2 R2 for short, which means eventually we are going to have an R2D2. Everybody's
Someday,
aware of
we're
that.
working towards it. NASA is diligently working towards putting R2-D2 on the International Space
Just
Station.
FYI.
You know that's a thing that's happening. Really quickly, before we head into break, the first test flight of Orion has been delayed until 2014. I'm sorry, December 2014. We're in 2014. So what you're looking at right there, that's some shots of Stage 2 and Orion. The test flight will not use the Space Launch System. Rather, it will use a Delta IV Heavy to launch. And that's actually why it's been delayed. It was supposed to launch in September or October. However, United Launch Alliance needed to kind of take that slot for a different military payload. So they're just doing a basic shuffling of the Delta IV Heavy. Parts of the Delta IV Heavy have already arrived at the processing location, so they're getting ready to put it all together, but it will be December as opposed to September, October. The Orion team said that they're going to push for a September, October release date of Orion anyhow.
Oh.
So the vehicle should be ready, but they just won't have a slot in the launch launch schedule to bring it up into space. This is exploration. What is it? Exploration flight test number 1, and the idea is Orion goes up. It'll orbit twice, I believe it is, and then we're checking the computer system, avionics. We're testing the new ablative heat shield, stuff like that, and just making sure that the vehicle does what we expect it to do, so that we're confident before we put humans on board. So that's ETF-1, Exploration Test Flight 1. Before we go into break, Cosmos hyper nerdy. Oh, I should have grabbed that clip. I forgot to grab that clip.
We didn't grab the clip.
Oh man, we should add that in the show notes. This is a great clip of this little kid watching Cosmos and just freaking out, and that's how I felt. I thought it was really great.
It's the moon. It's the moon.
Yeah, I thought it was really great, and I'm excited to see something like this back on television and people getting excited. And you can watch Cosmos. I believe it airs Sundays on Fox, Sunday nights on Fox. Check your local listings. It does air worldwide in something stupid like 100+ countries.
And for those of you who don't have TV and only watch the internet, it is also on Hulu, so no excuses for you. It's also on YouTube, I found out recently.
Wow.
Yeah, so they really are trying their best to get the word out to everybody.
Yeah, not kidding around. So check that out. And of course, once more, Patreon. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we come back from the show. But that is what makes this show go. So much like Cosmos, actually, someone commented last week saying that they like Spacevidcast more than both series of Cosmos, the Carl Sagan version and the Neil deGrasse Tyson version.
Aww.
And while I am flattered, I think they have a slightly more production budget for both of those shows.
But we have twice the hosts.
We have twice the hosts. But imagine what we could do if we had their budget. Ooh. Anyhow, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, our main topic, which is asking, are we forgetting about the moon? Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Look into her face, determination in her eyes. She won't give up or quit or fall for little fashion lies. Filled with awesome expectation, this girl's a fascination. And nothing in her way will keep her from her destination. Cause she's fire walking, she's fire walking. When it's hot, she keeps on moving, through the heat keeps on improving. Yeah, she's fire walking, she's fire walking to be free.
So when it comes to, I did it again. I get so excited about the topic.
Excited.
I forget to talk about the really important thing that helps make SpaceVidcast go. So patrons, SpaceVidcast patrons, these are the SpaceVidcast producers. Anyone who spent $5 or more on this episode is a SpaceVidcast producer. And you can become a SpaceVidcast producer as well by going to patreon.com/SpaceVidcast. And like I mentioned, we're doing something a little bit different with these slates this week, so I'll talk about that in the next segment in the viewer comments section. But really, it goes, even $1 helps so much. If you're willing to give $1 per episode, which is less than a cup of coffee, or less than a latte, I have no idea how much a cup of coffee is.
It's less than a cup of coffee most places.
Okay, it's less than a cup of coffee. So 1 day per week, you give up 1 cup of coffee and say, you know what, I'm gonna fund this science/space-based channel. That goes a tremendously long way to helping us do cool new things. So again, we'll talk about that in the third segment a little bit more. The main topic for this show: are we forgetting about the moon?
The what?
Exactly. The point is, and this is something that I'm asking you as a collective group, and the chat room, the live chat room that we've got going on right now, are we forgetting about the moon? We're so focused on Mars right now. SpaceX has said, look, we're going to Mars. I think they view it as the moon possibly as a distraction, right? Why go to the moon? What are you learning on the moon? We need to go to Mars. That's where we spread our true spacefaring legs and become a multi-planetary species.
Right.
Right? So, not wrong.
Right.
But there's something magical about the moon that you just don't get with Mars.
Yeah.
Imagine for a moment you want to get more people excited about space and science. You're not going to send them to Mars. You want them to experience it. If you can get someone to experience it, more than just talk about it, right? Going to space as an experience.
Even more than just the weightlessness.
Just more. That's a great start, though, right?
It's
So zero G
start.
parabolic zero G flights. That's step 1, and you can do that today. It's expensive, but you can do that today. Step 2. Suborbital flights, Virgin Galactic, X-Core, that other thing that we talked about last week that I can't remember its name.
That one.
That other rocket plane.
Yep.
Those are great step 2. You can go to for realsy space, or what's considered the boundary of space, and you can experience not just weightlessness, but you can see the curvature of the Earth, and you can look back on this little beautiful planet of ours and see it without any borders, see it without, just as nature intended. Well, they didn't intend us for us to go into space, but just purely as a single planet.
Yes, a single unit.
Single unit. What was that? Step 3?
Yes.
The next step, though, I think would be spending some time there, going to maybe a space station or possibly the moon. And the reason I say the moon as opposed to Mars is going to Mars, you're committing a large chunk of your life. You're committing at least 2 years of your life.
Right.
Most likely 3 to 5. Minimum. Minimum, if you want to go there. It's going to be expensive, and it's going to be hard.
Right.
Going to the moon will also be expensive to start with, but a couple of points. You've brought this up in the past. I think this is a super valid point. You can look at the moon from pretty much anywhere on the planet. You can look up and you can go, there are humans there.
Right.
Much harder to do with Mars. Mars is just a little point of light in the sky, and most people can't identify Mars.
Right.
You can identify the moon, though. You can look and you can go, there are humans up there. The second thing is, if you're experiencing it, it's just a few days to get to the moon, a few days to come back, and you could spend a week there. So you could take a 2-week vacation That's a much smaller time commit. You could
Right.
potentially take a 2-week vacation on the moon. Now, obviously, you can't do any of this today.
Right.
But we're working towards Mars. Who's working towards the moon? More so than just rovers. Who's working towards putting humans on the moon? And then part 2, does it matter? Maybe we shouldn't be focusing on the moon. We've been there. We've done that. Maybe we should focus on Mars.
Interesting. Well, so one of the things when we sort of discussed this earlier was I was saying, who wants to go on a trip for that long? I don't know if I want to travel for 3 days to get to my destination. And that's kind of why you said, well, we'll make it a 2-week thing. Because, you don't want to travel for 3 days, be there for 1 day, and then travel again for 3 days.
Yeah, it's got to be like
home.
a 2-week trip, right?
Nobody in their right mind is going to do that.
But my parents do that. I don't know how they do this, but they do that. They'll trek across country in a car, and they
Right.
purposely want the car because they want that experience of
Right.
going out and driving. And remember, that would be a 3-day experience. This will probably be the first time you're weightless, or at the very least weightless for that long, and the Earth will be getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's not like it'll be a little cramped, but I mean that will be kind of cool. You'll be able to experience that. You can radio back home and talk about stuff. It'll be kind of a cool journey.
Okay, so there's that. And like you said, I mean, when the same thing of, looking up at the moon and saying there's people on there, I know that. I think the reverse is also true, right? You were saying that Mars would just be a dot in the sky. And we've seen pictures of Earth from Mars, and it's the same kind of thing.
It's a dot.
Right?
It's kind of cool, but it's still just a dot in the
Right,
sky.
but when you're on the moon, you can look back at Earth. Right? Mm-hmm. That's a whole nother sort of sensation.
Well, it depends on where you're at on the moon, but yes.
Right. But
let's assume that's true. Yes.
There's the option too, I suppose, is where I'm getting at, where you can be on the moon and look back at Earth and say everyone that I've ever known, ever, other than the people I'm with, are right there, and that's a really, really cool thing. And so I don't know. I mean, that's interesting, but at the same time, like maybe what's wrong with an asteroid?
Asteroids are harder because they're not necessarily just stationary, right? They could be swirling and swiveling and doing weird things.
Right.
Mining asteroids kind of makes sense to me, but habitating one, using it as a place to get away, I'm not sure I buy that one yet.
Okay.
I mean, I would argue for a space station like a Bigelow inflatable HAB,
Right.
something that's low Earth orbit, easy to get to, single day up, single day back, assuming a quick approach.
Right.
The moon is a logical next step for that.
Right.
And then the step after that, I feel like, is Mars. But that's not from a pushing humanity forward. That's from a getting everyone excited about science standpoint.
Well, I suppose, yeah, right. So, for those of you who watch the show, and particularly post-show, you know that Ben and I are great big Disney nerds. We live right near Disneyland. We were married at Disney World. Disney in the same country, but it's completely separate coasts, and one is much larger than the other, et cetera, et cetera. And people keep asking us, what are the differences, the main differences between the two? And ultimately, our answer comes down to they are for different types of purposes. They're for different purposes. So maybe that's what Moon and Mars are. They're different destinations with different purposes. Does that make sense?
Sure, but we're targeting. Yes, and I do want. Actually, I've been kind of glossing over this. I think Rick Mann said something that was brilliant, which is people used to take trips for days and ocean liner trips for weeks. So it's not unheard of to go someplace and
I
spend.
didn't say it was unheard of, but in the day of instant information, right?
All right, true.
I mean, our attention spans are not what they used to be.
So it's the argument of Moon versus Mars, I guess, which is, if you can use the moon as a way to get people excited about Mars, that might help money start to flow for Mars, which could then make Mars travel more rapid. So what could happen, I'm not saying what would happen, but one potential outcome is you set up your habitat on the moon, which should be easier to get to and easier to maintain than Mars. Questionable on that, right?
Yeah, it's all relative, but sure.
Because that may not be a true statement. That data point may be wrong. I openly admit that. But let's assume for a moment that it's not. That
Sure.
it's twice as hard to get to Mars than it is to the moon,
Right.
and set up a permanent habitat. right? So twice as hard to do Mars. If you do the moon first, you can use that as a way to get other people excited about this stuff, about people getting excited about space, and use that to then fund your Martian trips. So it would take you maybe 10 years to get to the moon, and then 10 years to get to Mars.
At the same time, though, you don't want to just pin all of your hopes and dreams on the moon in order to get to Mars. If your destination really is Mars, why are you settling for the moon?
Okay, so good point. Good point. So then you would have, why not have both running concurrently? Right. Have someone doing the moon and have someone doing Mars.
Right.
SpaceX is doing Mars. I have very little doubt in my mind that SpaceX will go to Mars. It's pretty clear. SpaceX will put humans on Mars, and it's just a question of will they be first or not.
Right.
I think they will actually be first at this point. I don't see anyone else nearly as far along as they are, but I'm biased. So SpaceX is going to Mars. Other entities like SLS and NASA have said we want to go to Mars.
Right.
Who's putting humans on the moon?
China.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So China.
And Golden Spike.
But Golden Spike isn't putting them on the moon. I think they're going around the moon. No. Golden Spike isn't doing any of that. Golden Spike's going to asteroids.
No, you're thinking of planetary resources.
Both Planetary and Golden Spike are doing the same thing.
All right.
Yeah, they're both asteroid mining.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess, where's the Mars one for the moon? Where's Moon one?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I guess. I mean, China, though, right? Like, aren't they? I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. So China has said that they want to go to, but are they going to stay on the moon?
Well,
I have no idea.
Would they? Why on earth would they?
Wait, so are they just going to flags and footprints again? At which point, that's kind of exciting it's the same problem as Apollo. It's exciting for a while, and then it's not exciting anymore.
Right.
What's truly exciting, what gets people inspired, is when they can participate, and it impacts them. So not only do you need a colony or base on the moon, oh, look at you.
Yeah.
I'm totally wrong.
Golden Spike is going to the moon. That's what I said. Anyhow.
All right. But how real is that? So SpaceX,
I don't know.
So SpaceX is very real. How real is Golden Spike? Maybe very real, and I don't know.
I don't know. We
why did I think that they were going? All right, chat room. Why did I think they were doing asteroids? Why am I crazy? Anyhow.
Sorry, not to derail that, but yeah.
Deep Space Industries. Oh, that's why I screwed up. I messed them up with Deep Space Industries.
Copy that.
The wrong synapse fired up there.
Thank you.
I am very sorry. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry. I was wrong.
Thank you, Heldesk.
So, yes. All right. So maybe we do have enough organizations going to the moon, but are they going to be able to do it? And is it something that they should be doing? So this is where we turn to you, the Spacevidcast community, and ask you to keep the conversation going. Go to youtube.com/spacevidcast, go to spacevidcast.com, go to patreon.com/spacevidcast, and comment on this episode. We'd love to hear what you think. Are we forgetting about the moon? Are we not doing anything with the moon? Is the moon important at this stage, or should we just skip the moon and go straight to Mars? And the companies that are focusing on the moon, Golden Spike, you mentioned, was one. China is another. You're right. They're not a company, but you get the idea. Are the entities focusing on the moon, are they going to be able to go to the moon, set up a colony, kind of do all the things that we're talking about going on Mars? And is this important? Is the moon important in the grand scheme of humanity? Or should we just skip it and go straight to Mars? Or Titan, or wherever, right? Because I feel
Enceladus.
Someone once said, I'd love to go to the surface of Saturn, and I'm like, that's not a thing.
That's like getting married on the sun.
You can't.
Only at nighttime, though, because it's darker.
All right. So,
it's cooler.
So, yeah, what do you think? Leave your comments on the show. We're going to take a quick break. And speaking of comments, when we come back, comments from last week's show where we talked about the lunar rights, like who could own the moon. So when you go to the moon or when you go to the Mars, can you own that land?
Can you put a picket fence down?
Can you that would be kind of, I want that picture.
I know.
On the moon, Earth in the background, a picket fence, and an astronaut standing outside like pounding it into the...
I want an astrodog.
An astrodog. How would that work? We'll be right back. Do you put it in like a spacesuit? Or does it go in a bark? Yeah.
1, 0. Liftoff.
The fleet of space shuttles were doing amazing things in space. We've got all your space geekery right here.
And welcome back. We'd like to thank the Spacevidcast patrons who made this. The font's getting smaller.
We need to do something about that.
Well, no, here's what happened. Here's what changed between last week and this week.
Yes.
Is if you're a Spacevidcast patron, so let me clarify this. Leave this slide up for a moment so you can
Just a
actually
second.
read it for just
Almost.
a second.
You can find your name in it.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a Spacevidcast patron, that's anyone who spent anywhere from $1 on, essentially. So anyone who spent more than $1 on this episode, on this exact episode, you are a Spacevidcast patron. And again, thank you very much. Every dollar helps make this go. And the neat thing about Patreon is you can set limits, right? So you go, oh, well, I know that they do multiple episodes per month. So do I want to give them... what happens if they do 10 episodes? I don't want to give them, $5 per episode and then have them.
Yeah, here's the deal. The really nice thing about the cap on it is that it's helping us stay consistent, but it's also helping us not screw you over, okay?
Right.
So you only have $4 extra a month. So we typically do about 4 shows a month, and you can say $1 per show, but no more than $4. And that helps us per show, but it also makes sure that we don't just put out something random and silly and Ben putting his shoes on and calling it a show and then charging you for it.
That would be an epic show that people would pay for, though.
Well, yeah, because you've never seen it, and it's a whole entire production. But the point...
Now people do want to see
I
it.
know.
Now they do want to see it.
We'll put it out, but we won't call it a show. The point here is that it's helping you maintain your budget, but it's also letting you help us.
Yeah, if you get value from the show, please consider giving value back. The best way to do that is via monetary, right? So we can do cool new things. And you can see there are goals. Not only are there levels for you to subscribe at, there are different goals for us to reach. And we are so close to our next goal of $400 per episode. And at $400 per episode, we can get some additional gear. That's going to get rid of this microphone. It's going to give us some lapel microphones, so you're going to some better audio. It moves us to a new audio board as well. It's going to get us a PreSonus, the small PreSonus mixer, and that's important because it does limiting and compression on the board. So the new microphones plus the PreSonus mixer should give you much better audio overall for the show. Also, new cameras, so we'll have a few more views for you of the studio and one of the control room where you can talk to Dutta. And that's just the next goal. That's just $400. As we grow and as we get bigger, we can do bigger and cooler things. And if you go to Patreon and look at some of the other programs, you can actually see some of the technology shows, they're like $2,000 per show, $5,000 per show, $7,000 per show. And technology is cool and it helps everyone. But there are 9 million technology shows out there. There are not very many space shows out there. I would love to see Spacevidcast competing at the same level as those technology shows.
Yeah.
Because A, I'm competitive, but B, I think space, human spaceflight, the settlement of other planets, and talking about this stuff and getting people excited about this stuff is more important than technology because you can get technology from what we learn from this stuff.
Oh, I forgot to mention that the technology that's going into R2 is actually being used here on Earth for exoskeletons for people with disabilities.
Cool. That's really cool. That's really awesome
Perfect
stuff.
example. And I love the 66 cents, you guys. Right now we have 108 patrons. It's $331.66 per show, and I love the 66 cents. I think it's hilarious.
So please consider helping us on Patreon. A couple of final notes on Patreon. One, we listened to your comments, and we were doing this spiel at the beginning of the show. A lot of people were like, just shut up and get to the news. So we do that now. We also changed it, and we used to do all the patrons all at once, and now we split it up in between the 3 different sections. And what changed this week, if you didn't notice, is that if you are a Spacevidcast Premier member, your name was in the show 3 times. You were on the Premier slide, you were on the Producer slide, and you're on the Patreon slide, Patron slide. And so that's new, which means that there are a lot more people on the Patron slide than there were before, which is what made the font so small. Let me know if you like that. As kind of an extra perk, you give us more money, your name shows up in the show more times. I think that's kind of cool. And what other perks would you guys like to see? Something where we're not mailing you stuff, because that gets weird. Because do I mail you something every time we do a show? Do I mail you once a month? How do I make that go? It doesn't work the same way. But something that you would get value from, we're going to be doing some Google Hangouts with you guys at certain levels, so that's an obvious one. But what else would you guys like to see that makes it valuable for you so that we can add more value to you so that you can go, yeah, I can justify, $5 a show or $1 a show or $10 a show, whatever it may be. All right, let's go ahead and get into those comments from last week's show. This first one comes from CocoFan50, which says, why can't we make an international governing space body, draw a line where space starts, and then give it control over space? Well, there's no technical reason why we can't do that. I think it's all political, right? At this stage, it's how are you going to get the governments of the entire world to agree on a universal space body,
right,
and then give them power over a certain altitude
versus themselves,
right? They probably want to control it themselves,
right?
So we could technically do that. I just think politically it'd be very difficult to do. I don't work in that arena, so who knows? Maybe not.
I suppose.
This one comes from Javier Norris, who says, I think I said that right, Javier Norris.
Yes.
That's Javier_Norris, who says, interesting to consider ownership of celestial bodies as possible incentives for space entrepreneurs. Given this considerable capital expenditure, it might make sense to allow some, quote, participant expiration date ownership to balance out the risk reward. So in other words, you get it for X amount of time,
right?
But not necessarily forever,
right?
Just because you're a participant.
Ooh, because you're renting it,
kind of, yeah,
like a timeshare,
like a lunar timeshare. Yeah,
I'm in. Done.
Welcome to the Spacevidcast Lunar Timeshare Program.
Yes.
We'll take a cue from ULA, and your satisfaction guaranteed or your money back. See what I did there?
Yeah, I see what you did
there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
okay. Anyway.
Patreon.com/ I'm just Bill Hughesley, who is a regular viewer and avid commenter. So first off, thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Says, just spread out a big tarp around your structure. The tarp itself is a type of structure. The tarp is yours, so that gives you your land to do your work on. That brings up an interesting thing, which is, generally speaking, property rights are, just kind of that amount of land, but we don't, and I know that there is, like, you own this much above it and below it,
right.
But with the advent of us colonizing space, I think we're going to have to really think more in three-dimensional space about, okay, how much do I really own above and below this?
Right.
I mean, that's going to become a much bigger deal.
Yeah, well, we've talked about airspace and that whole idea of like no-fly zones and what have you. But yeah, once you start getting into mining and all of that, the reason that you don't own everything all the way down to the Earth's core for where your house is because there's plumbing and electrical and all kinds of other stuff that goes on underneath there that you shouldn't be touching anyway. People live above subways and whatnot, and the government kind of takes care of that, and that brings up all of those interesting ideas. But I like the TARP idea. It's an interesting little loophole. Said, well, this is mine, and therefore this is mine, and so that's mine.
I'll just put a green, like, AstroTurf down.
AstroTurf? Ooh, it brings AstroTurf. It has a whole new meaning now.
New meaning to AstroTurf.
Yes!
Oh, man.
I love it.
There's a meme there somewhere.
There is.
Moopers 2. I'd like to know who Moopers 1 and Moopers are.
I think it's Moppers.
Moopers.
No, Moppers. There's not two O's in that one.
It's way more fun to say Moopers,
well,
though.
Sure, until Moppers changes their name.
All right,
Go
fine.
on.
Moppers 2. Not as much fun. All right, I don't care who Moppers and Moppers 1 are.
Sad.
Why not have an After Dark channel? Since I have only made one show and I've been watching for a while, I feel like I'm missing out on some stuff. For those of you who remember Spacevidcast Epic, one of the rewards for Epic was an After Dark show. So when we're done doing this show, we stay on the air for a while and we continue to talk to you guys, maybe about space, maybe about Disney, most likely about Disney,
Usually
and with a little bit of space.
Hungry and tired we are.
Hungry and tired. Just random stuff. And that's why we don't post it to the Spacevidcast channel, because it's not really good enough for that. But sometimes it's fun, and people like to feel like they're part of the community, and we like to feel like you're all included.
Absolutely.
So that's where I say I understand, but no. It's a lot of extra work. More importantly, I think at this point, it's incentive to join us live. And I realize for some people around the world, because we are worldwide shows, one of the cool things about the internet, that can be very difficult to do. But everyone who's joining us live right now, and there are a ton of people in the chat room, that's one of the rewards that they get. It doesn't cost them anything, but they get to continue to talk to us after the show. And we'll just have a very candid conversation about anything at all. Along those same exact lines, I feel like, just a random thought in my brain, I feel like we don't have enough interaction with the chat room. And what I'd like to do, what we're doing today is we're trying the live stream chat room for the first time, and it's okay. I'm not sure if we'll keep it, but I also want to get some Twitter integration on the screen. So as you're watching the show, you can tweet with like a hashtag TMRO hashtag, and we'll pick those up, and we'll have someone moderating those, and we can then put those up on screen, and that would be kind of like the big way we'll communicate with you guys and kind of really bring the live element back to the show. We used to have that live chat room on the bottom. We got too big for that. I kind of like to bring it back, but I'm a little scared to do the live chat room itself. Twitter, I think, would be a great way. And the other nice thing about Twitter is when you're tweeting about the show, it can get other people who maybe you didn't know about the show or forgot about it. It can get them going, well, what are you talking about? And you can start side conversations.
For sure.
So that's something I want to do, and that is a Patreon goal. So if you go over to patreon.com/SpaceVidcast, and everyone's like, stop talking about Patreon. It makes us go.
It does.
Glander Brondurg.
Uh-huh.
Did I say that right?
Sure.
All right. I'm curious about the consequences of simply repealing or opting out of the Outer Space Treaty. The current treaty permits countries to withdraw with a 1-year notification period to all of the current signing countries. Well, that's the same. Yeah, that's what happens in the Outer Space Treaty. You can sign. You got a 1-year deal. You can get out of it if you want to. That would be it would be an interesting political landscape. Right. Remember, we being the United States have already told China, no, you can't be part of the International Space Station. Right. In fact, you can't be a part of any of our space stuff. And so China said, fine, we'll build our own. And they did. So now China's going back to the moon. Now China can send taikonauts to space where the US cannot.
Great.
China's making some pretty good inroads because we told them no. Imagine what happens when we say, screw the Outer Space Treaty. What's China going to do then? Are they going to be like, all right, we're free to do whatever we want now? Who knows what will happen? What are the ramifications of that? So maybe you could, but you really need to think about it at a much higher level than I even mentioned. I don't even know. I mean, that's not an area that I'm well educated in, so I can't. Those are just off the top of my head. There's probably a lot more.
Unintended consequences.
Exactly. Boop, boop. Michael 5 says...
Michael 5. You're a nerd.
I was hoping I could just gloss over that. You wouldn't have noticed that. And then other people would be like, kind of like the Lego man that doesn't exist. Right. The sooner... I mean, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Oh, I have no idea what you're talking about, too.
The sooner new and cheaper human spaceflight arrives, the better. But to put a price, you just moved your. The price of the Soyuz seats into perspective, the cost of a seat on Dragon Rider proposed, so this is the SpaceX cost, is $20 million per seat. The cost of a Soyuz right now is $70 million per seat, and the cost of the space shuttle is $208 million per seat. So that gives you an idea as to how much things cost. That is not a fair comparison, Michael 5. And the reason I say that is because the space shuttle cost at $208 million. I assume you got that by multiplying that or basically taking the total cost of the space shuttle and dividing by 7 and giving the per seat cost. And sure, that would be how much it would cost if you were only sending astronauts up. But remember, with the space shuttle, you're also sending an entire payload up with it. So you gotta have to take that into account as well. It's weird because you have to send the astronauts, whereas on a rocket you don't have to send the astronauts. Or... you also kind of have to send the payload. I suppose you don't have to send a payload, but why would you go up without a payload?
Yeah.
So you're not comparing apples to apples there.
Right.
And I'm not sure that that's really fair to the space shuttle.
Right.
I'm not sure it would be as low as $70 million per seat, but I'm also pretty sure, and I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that one seat of Soyuz that we pays for the whole mission for Russia. So there's that too.
I mean, just that's what they're charging. That doesn't mean that's what it cost.
Yeah, exactly.
And those are two different things.
All right. Last comment, and that's from Taiwan John 88. This is a long one. I watched the Senate hearing on the evolved expendable launch vehicles with Elon, and I found it to be fairly typical. Elon made some good points, and the entrenched establishment side-trotted out their usual arguments. Yawn. In the end, it hardly matters. SpaceX launch manifest is going to be packed to the gills anyway, with or without military cargoes. And once they get their rockets even partially reusable, SpaceX will quickly crush the competition, hopefully including the money pit known as the Space Launch System. So, let's be fair to SLS. As far as I know right now, they are on time and on budget.
Right.
That doesn't mean that it's not sucking a lot of money, because it is extremely expensive. Even on budget, it's extremely expensive. Yeah. But it is actually kind of moving forward along the lines they said it would, and they are building a super heavy lift rocket. Mm-hmm. There is always the chance that the commercial companies will fail.
Right.
There's no guarantee in anything in life. And there's no guarantee that anyone else will build a super heavy lift rocket. Mm-hmm. So just because someone else is promising that their paper rocket will be cheaper than your paper rocket, let's move forward with both paper rockets, ? I mean, there are arguments on both sides of that, right? So it's so expensive to build SLS. It's so expensive to fly SLS. Maybe it's not worth that paper rocket because NASA can't really afford to fly it. Right. So we build it and then we can't fly it. I don't know what the real answer is, but right now I'm kind of, any competition is good competition.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that it won't just be this paper rocket and this paper rocket. I'm hoping it will be this real rocket,
right,
and this real rocket, and this real rocket. And let's see what we can do with these really cool, really awesome rockets that humanity has never seen before.
Yeah.
That's the exciting thing about all of that. All right, that's our show for this week. I'd like to thank everyone so much for watching. We will have a show next week, I believe. However, SpaceX has pushed their launch back to the end of March. That's right on a weekend, so we will likely be missing that particular show. We'll keep you guys up to date. Make sure to follow Spacevidcast at twitter.com/SpaceVidcast, or if you follow our live stream channel, livestream.com/SpaceVidcast, and follow us, you'll get notifications as to when the live shows are going to be and when they're live. So if you are like, oh, I forgot, you can just use that. You can add it to the calendar. It's a really awesome service from Livestream. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. For those of you watching live, stay with us. After Dark is up next, and we'll see you guys next week. On Mars, well, they don't have antennas that are going to make it all the way back to Earth, so we use these satellites. We use Odyssey and MRO we beam the signal from the rovers up to those satellites, and then the satellites repeat it back over to Earth. So when MRO was offline, we've actually took some of that science down. Now, we still had Odyssey, so we could still use Odyssey for all of that, but it wasn't really available for full science payloads because you can only do it when Odyssey is overhead.
Right.
If that makes sense. So we're back to full science. Full speed for full science on Mars with both MRO and Odyssey for opportunity and curiosity, and yay. And hopefully they'll figure out what's going on with the transmitter.
Exactly.
Yep. Atlas V money back guarantee.
Woohoo!
All right, so you want to fly your commercial payload on an Atlas V rocket.
Because who doesn't?
Because who doesn't, right? It's an awesome rocket. It has a great track record. Coming up, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter goes into safe mode.
Atlas V issues a money-back guarantee.
R2 shows a little leg, and have we forgotten about the moon?
The what?
Stay tuned. Tomorrow begins now.
Oh, it's beautiful, Mike. Got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and
Private space station.
And welcome to Spacevidcast, episode 7.08 for Saturday, March 15th, 2014. My name is Benjamin Higgs.
Sure.
Ever since United Launch Alliance took it, here's a shot. This is what an Atlas V rocket looks like. It's a workhorse in the United Launch Alliance Army, right? They've used it many times, but generally not for commercial payloads. Usually it's for government payloads. And the reason it's used for government payloads, not for commercial payloads, is its price.
It's really expensive. Really, really expensive. We're talking $225 million to launch on an Atlas V, which is just, can be a lot, particularly when, the commercial, I was going to say launch providers, the commercial customers in general don't have that kind of money just sort of lying around, and you're going to put all of your money into just the launch itself. And comparatively, SpaceX Falcon 9 launch is about $45 million.
54.
I'm sorry, 54.
First up, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter went into safe mode and has since come back out.
Yes.
MRO went into safe mode on March 9th after an unscheduled computer swap, and then back on Thursday morning, March 13th, we actually resumed normal science back on the main computer, but the antennas, so what has happened is the primary antennas have failed to the backup area,
right,
and they've stayed on the backup antennas, but the primary computer's back in play again.
Right.
Now, we use MRO for a couple of different things on Mars. First off, its name kind of self-descriptive, right? Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, so it orbits Mars. It does recon work for us, so it's going to take pictures of Mars. But more importantly, the two remaining rovers that we've got on Mars, we've got Curiosity
Yes.
and Opportunity.
Yes.
I'm like, Spirit. No. Not Spirit. We've got Curiosity and Opportunity remaining. Higginbotham with me, as always, is my beautiful, lovely, wonderful, and talented wife, Carrie Ann Higginbotham, and we'll be your hosts for this episode today. Before we get started, we'd like to say a huge thank you to the Spacevidcast Premier patrons who have helped make this show go. Now, the Premier patrons, they're the ones who have spent $10 or more at patreon.com/SpaceVidcast on this episode. So $10 or more, and you could become a Spacevidcast Premier member. You not only get your name in the show, but there are a few other perks as well. You can get more information at patreon.com/SpaceVidcast, and it's members like that help ensure that Spacevidcast continues to do this week after week.
Yeah.
And it's a great program. I think it's a lot better than the previous program we had, which is epic. If you get value from Spacevidcast, please consider putting value back in. Now, you don't need to spend $10. You can spend less than that. There are different reward levels that you can go. So more information at patreon.com/SpaceVidcast. Let's go ahead and get started with some space news.